This video is an introduction to vscode-q. I'll go through vscode-q in 6 sections: Setup, Panels, Configurations, Language Server, Query, and Tips. To set up a vscode-q, go to Extension Panel, type KDB, click Q. You should see an install button here. I also recommend you to install Dracula. This is a color theme for VS Code. It supports semantic highlights. I'll explain it in Language Server section. If you're going to connect to a remote box, you may want to install remote SSH. This allows you to connect to a remote box. After you install vscode-q, go to Q panel. There are server lists, Server Explorer, Query History. Click Add a Server. There are special colors for Dev, UAT production tags. Now click the server to connect to a server remotely, and the Server Explorer will load all variables. This icon means dictionary or namespace. You know, namespace is actually a dictionary. Expand it. This means table, and you can click a preview button to preview a few lines in output channel. This is a variable. You can hover over to check the type of this variable. It's a symbol. If you want to check the value of it, you can click preview button, and the value will show in output channel. This means function. You can hover over to check the definition of this function. You can also load this function into output channel by click preview button. There's a query history panel as well. It shows all the queries you sent to the server. You can hover over on the item and check the details of the query: server, time, duration, and query. About configurations for vscode-q. To open settings, use Ctrl-Shift-P and type in settings. We want to click settings UI here. Type Q space ext extension to filter out vscode-q settings. The first one is auto refresh. The Server Explorer will only load all variables when it connects to the server. It won't refresh when you send queries to the server. But if you want to refresh every time you send a query to the server, you can use this option, or you can temporarily turn on by click this button. The second one is excluded namespaces. So if you know there's a big namespace on the server side that will take a long time to load, you can add the namespace here. You don't need prefix dot here. Server Explorer will skip this namespace. Next one is preview query limits. This one is related to preview button in Server Explorer. You can change this to 10. So every time you click preview button, it will load 10 rows of the table. You will notice there's a pop-up here. So you need to reload or restart VS Code to make the configuration take effect. To reload VS Code, use Ctrl-Shift-P and type reload. When you click reload window, it will reload the VS Code. Auto clear will clear history in output channel. If you check this option, This channel will only show the latest results. Console size is related to System C in KDB. The first one is rows of results, and the second one is character numbers in each row when you get a result from a KDB server. Include query, this option is to include query in the output channel. Dismals, this one is dismal configuration for grid mode. I'll switch to grid mode, and you click preview button, check grid. You can see it actually wrote 3 dismals in grid mode. These two options are for running a Q script. The first one is environment file path. The second one is Q binary path. Open a Q script. This button here. Click play. You can see it's actually running this script. Now, if you want to source a environment file before running this, you can input a file path here. And if you run this again, now you can see it's actually trying to source an environment file and run this. Last two configurations are for language server. The first one is the path to be included. The second one is the path to be excluded. For this repo, all source code is in code. So if you switch this to Q language server, you can see it cannot find any source files in this repo, and there's some features will not be available. I'm going to change for this workspace only, so I'll click workspace, and now I'm going to change this into code. In a few seconds, you can see Q language server is refreshed, and it can find source files in code folder now. And it will load all these source files and analyze them. I'm going to show you language server features. To change a parameter in a function, click the parameter, press F2, type a new name, press enter, and it will change all occurrence of this parameter in the function. If you want to change a global variable, for example, .log.information, first you can see there's a usage in test.q. So if I change this, f2.log.info, now you can see it's actually changed in log.q and also in test.q. If you want to check a definition of a global variable, for example, the log.info, right-click it, go to definition, and it will jump to the definition of this function. If you want to check the references of this function, the usages of this function, right-click it, choose Pick Reference, and you can see where it has been used. If you want to search a variable in a repo, type Ctrl+T, type a name, click it, and you go to the definition of this variable. If you want to check all the definition in your file, you can go to the file, use Ctrl+Shift+O. It will list all definition, for example this function. For auto-completion, vscode-q provides variables in all source code file and also on the server side. It also provides color names defined on the server side. For example, if I type handle, you can see a lot of handles here. Click one, and if you want to check where's the definition, you can right-click it. If I want to select a table on the server side, after you connect to the server, it will give you auto-completion. And for the column names, for example, height and volume. Next one is a handy feature. After you define a function, .log and .log_info. If you call this function, you can see it's actually giving you signature help. The first one is level, the second one is message. Error. Error. The second function is a projection, because the first parameter is already provided. If you call this function, it actually knows there's only one parameter is required, it's message. Last one is semantic highlight. This function has two parameters, and they are all in orange color. This is actually semantic highlight. So this is actually help you to check which one is parameter, which one is variables defined in the function. So in this case, the column name is also called date, and the parameter is also date. In this case, you probably want to change this to dt, and this one is dt as well. Now you can click to see which one is column name and which one is parameter. I'm going to show you how to send queries to a remote server. You already know how to connect to a server. Just click it. If I want to send a line to the server, just go to the line and press Ctrl-Q. And if you want to send a selection to a query, select the code and press Ctrl-R. If you want to send a block of code to the server, for example this function definition, you don't need to select them. Just place your cursor at any position in the block code and press Ctrl-E. It will query this block of code and go to next block code. If you run this again, you can see it's actually moving to the next block again. There are other query modes as well. You can change query mode by clicking this button, or there's another one here, Q console. Change to grid. Now if I run this line, I load the trade table into grid mode. You can click grid to check table, chart to check the chart, grid and chart. You can also make some configuration here. In the chart, if you want to remove some data, you can click it and it will be removed from the chart. Now you can see there's only high and low in this chart. You can download data and save chart here. You cannot do much customization in grid mode because it actually depends on the query. There's another query mode, visualization. Run the same code again. You can see data has been loaded into a K-grid. You can change it to a chart. Click K-grid, change to Y-line. Now I put high, put a low here, get rid of open. This is the same chart as the previous one. There's also other chart as well. I change it to Y area and I'll use volume. You can see another type of chart here. I'll switch back to console. If you try to load a table that has more than 1000 rows, for example, this 2000 rows tray, if I query it in visualization mode or in grid mode, you only load the first 1000 rows. You may want to load the full table. You need to click frame icon in server list, and you'll see there's another icon in here. Now if you query again, it will load all rows in that table. Last one is about hovering a variable that's already defined on the server side. For example, this tray table. If you hover over this tray table, you can see a preview of this table, the type, and data. In the last section, I'm going to show you some tips when you are using VS Code. The first one is about configure Q output to automatically scroll down to the latest result. In our Q output, if you scroll up to check some historical results, and if you run query again, Q output channel doesn't scroll down to the latest result. What you need to do is to click this button and run this again. Now it scrolls down to the latest result. If you want to persist this change, open Ctrl-Shift-P, type settings, UI, Smart Scroller, uncheck this option. Sometimes you may get a result that's so wide that it's actually wrapped into lines. For this case, if you want to disable word wrap, open vscode-q page, scroll down, there's tips here. Just copy this. Open Ctrl-Shift-P, and now we want to use settings, but this time we want to use JSON. Press comma here, paste it, save it. Now it becomes one line, and you can scroll over to see the whole result. There's configuration for commands highlights. So anything after exclamation mark or question mark, to highlight them, but you need to paste this into the JSON settings as well. Check this. Now they are just normal commands. After you paste this here, save it, you can see they are highlighted in red and in green. The final one is about switching server. You know you can switch server by click a server in the server list. And you also can switch server by click here. And there's one more way to switch server. Check these two commands. Go to the line and press Ctrl-Q. It will switch to this server. To insert this command, type Ctrl-Shift-P and insert. Click it, and it inserts a label that you can use to connect to a server.